With Nick Eers officially signing in Carolina, the dust is beginning to settle on NHL free agency. Where's the NHL at large? On today's edition of Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is my good friend and one of the co-hosts of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies, and we want to thank everyone that is making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we have so much to get to. We are going to start with the big picture, landscape changing stuff in our opening segment. Nick Eers, Mitch Marner, a whole lot more. In our second segment, we're going to pivot to a bit more of a philosophical conversation about macro free agency trends, what we think is going to happen to free agency as the salary cap continues to grow going forward. And then we will tie a bow by talking about how free agency has changed over time and our best guess as to how things are going to go. So, Hunter, to start things out, we were promised some frenziness. We were promised some chaos last week at the draft. We were promised this might be the most active draft ever. We were promised free agents. We were promised a Mitch Marner bidding war. I guess we got a Nick Eers bidding war. I guess. I don't know how many other teams made offers, but
the insiders lied again, sir.
It's hard not to feel like the balloon got deflated as soon as the Mitch Marner sign and trade was revealed in the middle of last week, because that was genuinely interesting. We hadn't seen a player of Marner's caliber get to free agency in a long time. So the fact he was going to be there in the prime of his career as a 27-year-old, and he didn't get there, it's hard not to feel a little disappointed. But I thought Vegas or Carolina made sense for him. Vegas ultimately gets it done. Just sitting here, it's hard not to feel like we're operating in a Vegas, Florida world right now. I mean, Florida signed all of their guys again. Florida clearly looks like the best team in the East again. The West looks like it's going to be the trenches of World War I again. I'm scared to see what the Western Conference looks like come opening night in October.
Yeah, I mean, with Florida, they said it couldn't be done, and then they go out there and they get it done. I think Ekblad was the one that everyone kept saying, they go, he's going to market, he's going to market, he's pricing himself out. Panthers give him all that term, they cut down the AAV. Boom. They get Sam Bennett done. Boom. And then Brad Marchand, it looks like he's potentially going to go to market. The Bruins, they want to see if they can get him, right? The Maple Leafs, they want to see if they can get him. I'm sure the Utah Mammoth were trying to see if they could get him. Nope. He signs another big term contract, by the way. 6 years, he's 37 years old. That takes him to 43. Nick, there's no way he's going to see the end of that contract. He's probably going to retire before that contract expires when you look at his age.
He'll get allergic to his equipment at 40 years old somehow.
The full Marian Hossa effect right there. But no, like the Panthers, what a remarkable job by them in free agency to bring those three back. And in turn, Nick, they're running it back once again. And you look at the rest of the East right now. We'll get to Nick Eers in a second because I really like that deal for the Hurricanes. You look at this conference. Who's beating them in a 7-game series if they're fully healthy and if they're rested? I don't think you can find a team. I sure can't find a team right now, especially now that Marner is in Vegas. That's a lot of production for the Leafs to replace. And I actually have not minded the Leafs offseason so far, but that's still quite a bit of production now that Marner is with Vegas. By the way, Nick, congratulations. You called it on Locked On NHL a few weeks ago. You said Mitch Marner was going to Vegas, and that happened. 8-year deal. And, speaking of the Golden Knights, as of right now, and still very early in the offseason, I think they might be the team to beat in that conference. It's the deeper conference for sure, but you have Marner now, you have Eichel, you have Stone. I mean, that's nasty. Not many teams can go punch for punch with those three dudes. I know Pietrangelo is out, and it looks like, Nick, it's really sucks that he's probably not going to play again at this rate. They still have Shea Theodore there, but once a lot of these players came off the market before free agency began, it just kind of created, what's the word I'm looking for? It just kind of dampened the mood a little bit because we were all so excited for some of these dudes to get big paydays on other teams right when July 1st hit at noon. But They all came off the market either a week before, a day before, hours before, and it just dampened free agent frenzy as a whole. I mean, we still saw some hilarious overpays. I don't know what the Los
We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
Yeah, I don't know what the Kings are doing. We'll get there in a second. But to wrap this all up, it just kind of dampened the mood a little bit.
We want chaos. We want everybody to get to market, and we want bidding wars. It's not fun when everyone stays where they are. The whole reason it's called a frenzy and TSN and Sportsnet have 6 hours of panels convened is because they're expecting action. They know this alongside, a Stanley Cup final. These are the biggest days in the hockey media landscape, is when there's activity, because everybody, and I mean everybody, thinks they know how to be a GM. We all play fantasy sports on some degree. We all think we know what it takes to run a team effectively. So everybody gets to have an opinion. And when everybody gets to have an opinion, it makes things more lively. So speaking of Nick Eers, number one, and I love Nick Eers, one of my favorite players in the NHL, transition demon. He does not fit Carolina stylistically in the slightest bit. I have no idea how Carolina is going to have a transition demon who carries the puck through the neutral zone with speed and loves to create off of the rush.
Maybe Rod is changing his system a little bit, man.
I mean, they'll find a way to make it work. He's a gifted hockey player. I don't think Carolina is going to turn him into a dump and chase Jordan Martinook clone, but at the same time, the fit's not really there. Stylistically, this does not make sense in the slightest. He's not a dump and chase guy. He doesn't forecheck particularly well. He's not a physical player in the slightest. He's gifted, of course. I think he's a great playmaker and a strong puck carrier. I just don't really see the fit stylistically. I'm sure it'll work out fine, but he's going to end up being like a 50 to 55 point guy on this team, when if he landed in the right spot, he could have been a 70 or an 80 point guy on the right team in a more explosive, dynamic offense.
Well, again, maybe Rod is changing up some of the things in his system after losing the Panthers yet again the second time in 3 years. I keep making the point that when the Hurricanes play a team that has better big dogs, they get absolutely whooped. And I think you're right. Even though he doesn't fit stylistically, I think the Hurricanes at this point, Nick, are kind of like, we have to sign one of the top players on the market. We have to see if he can be a difference maker, because we don't have enough difference makers on our team. You look at how aggressive Carolina has been this offseason. They're throwing out money like this is rare. Like, you don't really see the Hurricanes throw out this many big ticket contracts in an offseason. Nick, you've seen the reports about the Hurricanes owner, and people say he's cheap and all that. They just paid a handsome price to go get Keandre Miller. They gave up Scott Morrow and 2 pretty good picks to do it. And I like Scott Morrow quite a bit, by the way. They go out now and get Nikolai Ehlers, and that's someone that can play in your top 6 right away. I don't think they're done. I think Eric Tulsky is going to exhaust every available option to keep upgrading his team going into next season. He sees that the window is still there. He sees that they have gotten very far in the playoffs these last few years. They just aren't able to beat the big dog. But if they are able to get upgrades in certain areas, obviously they will have a better chance. I still think in goal, there are some questions. I'm not sure what they're going to do with that this offseason, though it's still only July 3rd at this point. But I do like a lot of the work that Tulsky and company have done. And I think you're seeing even the owner, answering some questions about, he's cheap and all that, because he's throwing out a lot of money this offseason.
For sure. We're going to talk more about Carolina, because I do think that's an interesting wrinkle as far as where free agency is going, that we're seeing restricted free agents being able to leverage sign and trade. Yeah. So we're going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. And when we return, we will talk more about the state of free agency. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO to give you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is so much more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in just one place. So in addition to managing your money, you are building wealth. I will admit, before I started using Monarch, I definitely was not saving as much as I should have, made long-term plans a little more tricky. But after signing up for Monarch, setting a goal, keeping to it, I was able to pay off my vacation in August, and I cannot wait So if you are ready to take control of your finances with Monarch Money, you can use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year subscription. One more time, that's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. And speaking of the Hurricanes and Keandre Miller, Matthias McKelly also comes to mind as well. I am very curious to see if restricted free agents can continue doing this, because I think this is a good development. I think that the fact restricted free agents are saying to themselves, well, wait a minute, why wouldn't I at least listen to offer sheets as a means of leveraging their way to a better situation? I think Keandre Miller is an interesting case. So I had more than one person DM me over the course of the last 2 weeks, all types of conjecture about Keandre Miller, why the Rangers weren't particularly enthusiastic about him, why they didn't go to term with him. And we can talk about Gavrikov here as well, because this is directly adjacent. I think, and I generally have this mentality, if a team like Carolina looks at a guy and says, we see something there. And to your point, this is a team that does not like to spend big money. This is a team that doesn't like to commit long-term. I mean, Miller's making more than Jacob Slavin going forward now, which is crazy to think about. If a team like Carolina that has enough analytics guys to field an entire 18 skater team wants a guy, I'd be very weary if I were anybody on the phone with them. You know, the jokes we used to make about when Tampa Bay, Steve Yzerman was running the show. If he calls, just hang up, don't answer.
Yep.
That's kind of how I feel about Carolina, especially when it comes to something like Miller, someone who's, you know, I won't say a depreciated asset, but maybe somebody who has more juice. You know, there's definitely more there under the surface. And if anybody's going to be able to get something out of him, it'll be Carolina. I mean, they did this with Brady Shea 5 years ago.
Yep.
Brady Shea is the exact same example. The Rangers got a really nice return in the 2 picks in Scott Morrow. But at the same time, if I were Chris Drury, I'd be, what do they know that I don't, that they're willing to go this long on this guy? And I've been trying to give him away for half a season.
They also did a great job getting a lot out of Brent Burns as well for several years. So I really do think Keandre Miller, the fit just makes a lot of sense for me. He can eat up those top 4 minutes. When he's playing really well, he's great in his own zone. He's using his long reach to his advantage. He's skating really well in his own zone, breaking up plays. And all those to me are pillars of Rod Brindamore's system. And you saw some of the inconsistencies in Miller's game this year with the Rangers. Pierre Laviolette was not even close to getting the most out of him. I don't think he got the most out of almost anyone on the Rangers this year, Nick, if I'm being completely honest. And it just felt like a change of scenery for him was very needed. Even though Mike Sullivan is coming in, he's done a lot of good work throughout his coaching career, especially with the Penguins. It just felt like he needed a little bit of a change of scenery. And I do think with Brindamore, with the style that he coaches, the tactics that he uses as well, I think it's a slam dunk fit for the Hurricanes. And I do think he's going to play fairly well there. My curiosity is, how does also this bet work for the Rangers? You're swapping out Miller for Gavrikov. And Nick, you had a whole bunch of thoughts about this on your Twitter this week. Gavrikov, by far the best player that Adam Fox will have played with on his pairing, at least throughout his career. But are they going to get that return on investment for how big that contract is? I will say this, it came in cheaper than expected. 7 times 7. I think when you look at that and you look at what Chris Drury got back for Keandre Miller, I do think he did fairly a lot better of a job than I thought, because Morrow, he's a really good player from Carolina. And I think he's going to grow into, you know, an even bigger role with the Rangers. You get the 2 picks back as well. That's huge. But with Gavrikov, is his best hockey behind him, or is it still the best to come? I think Mike Sullivan can get a lot out of him, but is he going to have a year like this past year with the Kings, which, again, Nick, that was one of the best defensive teams in the league. Now you go to a team in the Rangers where
they were bottom 5. They were bottom 5 defensively last year. They were god-awful.
I don't think they'll be that this year with Sullivan, but I also don't think they'll be as stingy as the Kings were.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And like the undercurrent of all of this conversation, and part of why the Kings are so great at defense, is that forwards play defense. If you watch the Rangers last year, not a single one of the Rangers forwards had any interest in playing anything resembling defense last year. And the trickle-down effect of that was a scattered, disorganized team. And Gavrikov is unquestionably the best person Adam Fox will have played with in his NHL career so far. He's 29 years old. He has full no trade protection through his age 34 season, and then it becomes a 16-team no trade list. I think my big apprehension and why I didn't want the Rangers to do this, their best players are all over the age of 30. I should say their most expensive players, excuse me. Shesterkin will be 30 by the end of next year. Adam Fox is 27. He's the only important Ranger under the age of 30. JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck, Mika Zibanejad, Panarin, all over the age of 30. Panarin's an unrestricted free agent after this year as well. When all of your core guys who already weren't good enough to win a Stanley Cup in their prime are only getting older, why are you trading away a 25-year-old who has, 7 to 10 years left in the NHL? Getting older by choice under the guise of raising the floor of the team is kind of why they're in this boat to begin with. They didn't want to take that swing for Jack Eichel all those years ago because they were scared of the neck thing and said, no, we'll keep Zibanejad. He's good enough. He's fine. He's got a high floor. He's very good defensively. And Vegas won a Stanley Cup. And Zibanejad has a contract so bad the Rangers couldn't give him away, even if he didn't have no trade protection. But as you sit here, the Rangers will be better than last year. They're going to benefit from the East at large being pretty bad, frankly. I was talking about it with someone earlier today. You look around the Metro, after Carolina and the Devils, it's particularly hard. Like, Washington will be fine. I don't think they'll be as good as they were last year.
Playoff team, I think so. Last year, but are they going to win the Metro?
No.
I probably not.
Those two teams, Washington, Philly and Carolina, no. The Islanders, no. Columbus, maybe. That's what you have going for you if you're the Rangers. You don't need to do a whole lot better. I mean, they only missed the playoffs by 6 points last year, and they had a stretch where they went 5-15, and they still only finished 6 points out of a playoff spot. Maybe. And look, I think my main critique here is if you think Mike Sullivan is as good of a coach as you think he is, why wouldn't you try and roll 2 years of K'Andre Miller to unrestricted free agency and see if you could get the most out of him? Because, and I feel very strongly Carolina will get more value out of the Miller contract than the Rangers will out of Gavrikov. It's easier for a defenseman who puts up points like Miller will to get value, to produce value. The best a defensive defenseman's going to do is 0-0. And even then, Gavrikov's not a great skater. He's an okay skater. As he gets older, how is that going to hold up? Is he going to be somebody who ages well, like a Matthias Ekholm, or is he going to age like a Mark Stahl? You don't know until they play these games. And the Rangers adding more volatility to already what's a pretty old team, it just feels misguided for where they're at talent-wise. Gavrikov's good. Don't get me wrong. I think he's going to be very good as a Ranger. It just feels like they need more of a runway because it's going to be either they're really good or they're really bad. There's not really a path to the middle here with the group Chris Drury's assembled.
I'm just curious to find out, man. Like, are they going to be a playoff team or are they potentially going to be a bottom 10 team this year when you still look at that defense at large? Gavrikov helps. Fox is really good, but I still think below that,
it's bad. It's bad. Soucy, Carson Soucy, Urho Vakanainen, Will Borgen, Braden Schneider. None of those guys particularly exciting. Morrow, I think, is going to start in the AHL. He'll have a chance, but he's right-handed, so I'm a little skeptical how he's going to get in the lineup. And I know the Rangers people who cover the team just keep repeating the Chris Drury lineup. Well, Braden Schneider can play on the left like he's ever been good on the right. I think we should establish he's good on his strong side before we ask him to play on his offside. But we got to take one more break on today's show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about free agency at large, some of the other signings, and where free agency goes from here. Coming up next. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out with Hunter and I on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL as we sift through the debris of free agency, the draft, and some of these trades. So, sitting here now, it's very hard to see a world where Florida doesn't win the East again. Just flat out. Nobody's even close. I like all of the decisions Carolina made. I love Miller. Stankoven extension. You get You get Nick Eers. I love the moves. You got Svetch and Aho long-term. You got Slavin long-term. You bet on Chatfield. He's turned out okay. Kochetkov has great numbers, even though they don't use him as much as they probably should. They're still not better than Florida. They're not even close to being as good as Florida. I don't think there's anybody even within punching distance in the Eastern Conference of the Florida Panthers right now. They brought everyone back.
Yep. I think the only thing that's going to stop Florida is fatigue and their players not being healthy. I think if they have enough rest, which, I mean, that's the biggest thing. If they are healthy, but they are tired, I think a team can beat them. Just because, again, Nick, it's really hard to keep going back to all of these Stanley Cup finals. I mean, they've been to 3 in a row. They've won 2 of them. Going to 4 in a row, it's tough. But if there's a team to do it, might be the Panthers, just because I don't think the East is that good as it stands right now. I think Toronto, they're still going to be good, but I think they're going to take a step back in that division. Tampa Bay should be fairly good again, but I still don't think the Lightning are better than the Panthers right now. The Senators, I think, will be good again, but they're not better than the Panthers. You go to the Metro, I think the top 2 teams in that division right now are Carolina and New Jersey. I'd prefer Washington right with those 2 teams as well. After that, 4, if you want to argue, Rangers, the Jackets, the Islanders, the Flyers. That division is also pretty stinky going into next season. So I think right now the Panthers are very much the team to beat going into the 25-26 season. Another thing that really stood out to me, I missed having Ken Holland being a general manager, Nick, because that man threw out some crazy money on Tuesday. I will always respect Brian Dumoulin for everything he did for the Penguins. I don't think he is worth that contract that he gave out at this stage in his career. Again, amazing human being, both on and off the ice, 2-time Cup champion. But come on, man.
And an integral part of the Penguins going back to back. One of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL at his peak.
Yes. Well, 1,000,000%. He and Chris Letang together were dynamite. It was literally like this. And the Cody CC one was even crazier. 4 times 4.5. I can't. And then
for 7.5, you could have kept Gavrikov. They could have given Gavrikov 8 as opposed to those 2 guys 7.5 combined.
I think Ken Holland's a sleeper agent. I think he's a sleeper agent from the Oilers at this rate. They got Corey Perry. I actually do like that signing for them. I just don't know if they're going to win the Stanley Cup now, of course, as the joke. But I just really don't know what they were doing there. I think the Ivan Provorov deal in Columbus is also not very good. I think when you look,
can we talk about Tanner Janelle?
Yeah, I don't. The Bruins, they're spending too much money for me, I don't think they're a playoff team going into next season. No, and I just think they're spending too much money in free agency.
I saw somebody jokingly say the Bruins are going to solve the problem of having no second line talent by not having a second line. They're just going to have 3 fourth lines next year. And that's kind of what it looks like Don Sweeney's assembled up there. I mean, I get it. He can't entirely rip it down to the studs and just be bad because they have Swayman, McAvoy, and Pasta all in their respective primes, and they're all getting paid market value for their talents. But at the same time, man, that team is going to be miserable. Who's scoring goals on that team other than Pasta? It is really far-fetched to think. And look, I think the Atlantic's not great. Florida, Tampa, yeah. The Leafs will be a playoff team. Buffalo and Ottawa hang around. Montreal probably hang around.
I like Montreal's offseason a lot. I like I love the Dobson trade for them.
They had that trade. And what was the trade with St. Louis? The Molu for
Bolduc.
Yeah, Bolduc. That was a good upside. Look, there are a lot of Ranger fans who associate Jeff Gorton with very bad decisions, and it's not to defend his tenure in New York, but you see the vision there. They are very clearly and deliberately operating from a position of, okay, we have our building blocks. Let's put this group where it needs to be. You still have Reinbacher. You have a bunch of guys who are going to get more opportunities as we go forward. It's hard not to see the vision there. You maybe need to figure out goalie into the future long term. But other than that, man, you've got 4 or 5 forwards you feel really good about. You've drafted extremely well on the back end. You have the Calder Trophy winner. You got Caden Gooley, Reinbacher in the coffer. You're in a really nice position if you're Montreal to take a step, And the beautiful thing, if you're Montreal, you don't need all of your prospects to hit, but at least 1 or 2 of them are going to hit. And that's going to be a really good team maybe a year or two from now.
Oh, 100%. I think they're a playoff team heading into next season. I really like how their young talent keeps developing as well. That's definitely going to be a team that I want to watch even more going into next season. A couple more things before we wrap up. I do want to say this. I get what the Chicago Blackhawks plan is because they want to graduate a lot of their prospects to the league. But I think there comes a point in time where you want to help out Connor Bedard a little bit more during free agency. I just don't think they've done enough so far. Again, I know what their plan is. I get it. I just think they could stand to be a little bit more aggressive in free agency to give him some help. And then one last thing. People keep talking about, Nick, the 2026 free agency class is so good.
No one's getting there. How
many of these people are going to get there? Do you actually think Connor McDavid is going to get to free agency? Do you think even like Bob is going to get to free agency?
Bobrovsky, yeah. Bobrovsky, I could see.
Maybe, but I think they might sign him to at least a small extension. Does Kyle Connor get to free agency? No, I don't think so.
I could see a world where he wants to leave, where he wants to come to the States.
I don't know.
I think Winnipeg will overpay to keep him. And yeah. I think that the only guy I think who has a real chance of getting there, and even I don't really believe it, is Kaprizov. I think there's an outside world where Kaprizov could, but I think Minnesota is going to make him a very rich man.
How about Eichel? There's no way he gets there. Vegas is going to pay him all that money.
Yeah. Especially, and this is how I wanted to wrap up the show, so it's great we got here. With the cap going up, guys are not going to get there. They're either going to get extended ahead of time or they're getting traded. Guys are not going to get to free agency. It just, especially because everyone's going to have more money than they know what to do with now. I mean, I think that's part of why you didn't see maybe as much as activity as we thought we would. People have money right now. You know, every team got an extra $4 or $5 million in cap space just by virtue of the cap going up. You know, we're going to be at 95.5 this year. We're going to be at 104 the year after that. We're going to be really in a position where teams are going to say, okay, we'll eat the bad contract and maybe the guy bounces back, as opposed to trying to get rid of it as soon as possible. Especially if people are going to hold and play the long game with their assets. Why wouldn't you? If there's no market, why are you going to do what the Kings did and burn $8 million on 2 third-pair defensemen? Why wouldn't you just sit and wait? You know, you let that cap space accrue in season. And I do think that's part of why the Oilers probably won't make another move. They want to bank some space. So by the time we get to February, March, they can add a winger or two. If you can accrue some serious cap space. If you go into the season with $3-4 million, by the time you get to the deadline, you're talking about $8-9 million. You can really do some damage if you let that cap space accrue. And if you're a team like Edmonton, who's going to go into the season light, you know, I love Mangiapane. He's one of my favorite players in the NHL. That's probably a third liner on a cup team, but he's probably going to play a lot with Leon next year. So is Podkolzin. What's Kapanen going to do on this team next year? The Oilers have a ton of lineup holes. They didn't get in on John Gibson. John Gibson got traded before we even got to the draft, you know? And that's the thing. If you're the Oilers, they had to get rid of $9.5 million in just Evander Kane and Arvidsson just to fill out the team for next year, which is crazy to me.
And you still have the McDavid extension you have to get done. They already got Bouchard done. They're going to try to get McDavid done as soon as possible. May not be this month, but I still expect that to get done
before the season starts would be my 100%. Expectation.
I think he's going to get a boatload of money. But that's why I think you're going to start seeing with free agency, some of these teams, again, it's just going to be a lot of depth signings. Like sometimes you get the occasional star player or semi-star player to get to free agency, but I think going forward, again, you're still going to keep seeing a lot of these depth moves. I think like the big moves, Nick, for some of these contenders, it's going to be via trade, especially now with the cap going up, and some players will, you know, either A, not want to stay with their team, you know, maybe do a sign and trade situation, or B, you know, maybe teams are just looking for these quote unquote hockey trades to, you know, make their team better. So again, I really think that's what we're heading down here towards. People keep talking about that 2026 free agency class. Don't think a lot of those guys are going to hit it.
I'll believe it when I see it, brother. Yeah. Real quick before we get out of here, I love when I see a bag getter contract. Dmitry Orlov, bag getter. Mikhail Granlund, bag getter. I love when guys say, I'm just going to whoever's paying me the most money.
Cody Ceci, baby. He's a bag getter.
But the Kings are at least a decent team.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're a good player and you're going to go and you're just saying, give me the most money I can possibly get, you know, like Tyler Toffoli last year with the Sharks. I respect it. If you get to UFA, get as much money as you can. your family can't eat Stanley Cups, unfortunately. Your family can eat if you get paid big money. Your family can't eat Stanley Cups. Word to John Rivers. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On NHL. Thank you to everyone who made Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Hunter and I will talk to everyone next week. Everyone, have a good Independence Day if you're down in the States. See you guys soon.